Ladies and gentlemen, Rex Bear Elite Project, how the heck are you? I have two legends of legends with us. I have Lee Wheelbarger and Diamond from Oppenheimer Ranch. We're going to discuss many topics today. But first of all, the most exciting that I want to bring up right off the bat, which I find just absolutely over the top amazing, is this ET inventory of bodies by a spook intelligence that has been passed down to Lee, and Lee has been with different organizations within our governments and a go-to source for years now. So before we get into all the details, I would like to let you know, ladies and gentlemen, this podcast is brought to you in part by my Patriot Supply. Because of the grand solar minimum and these solar catastrophes, extreme weather, etc., a lot of people are getting prepared as much as they can. And there's some specials right now. If you go to preparewithleeproject.com, 92 meows, I have to say it like that because people give me a hard time if I don't, for $75. And we're talking organic seeds, water filtration systems, all sorts of great deals at preparewithleeproject.com. Okay, that's just a quick shameless plug. You'll thank me later. Lee, if you would, real quick for our audience, tell them, who are you? And tell us real quick about your blue electric solar yacht project. And I think that'll give a good precursor to the information that's going to be presented in this podcast. Buckle up, folks.
Well, for the last 33 years, I've been working for different government agencies throughout the United States and in other countries. And I was a guy who basically made spy toys like the Guy Q on James Bond that makes those individual gizmo gadgets. I have different patents for those. And so I've invented the helmet cam for the U.S. Army Telemedical Command. I've done surveillance systems, communication systems. I did the very first telephone conference call of Stu 3 phones. And a variety of things like that for government agencies, and I still consult with them today. Even though I'm somewhat retired, recovering from strokes from 2 years ago, and I live on a totally solar-powered yacht. It's called Electric Blue Solar Yacht, and so my wife and I have been working on this for 3 years, and when we get the boat done, which we're hoping to do so very shortly here, we were delayed because Hurricane Irma destroyed part of our solar array and damaged a bunch of things and so on and so forth, plus my strokes slowed it down. So we're hoping to get the boat done here very shortly and go on a 6,000-mile race around the eastern half of the United States on what's called the Great Loop. So we'll leave Florida, go up through New York City, go up the Hudson River, across the Erie Canal, through the Great Lakes, down the Illinois Canal to the Mississippi, then down the Tom Bigby Waterway down to Mobile, Alabama, and then back around to the lower part of Florida, probably either Miami or the Keys. And that'll be our 6,000-mile voyage. So if you want to see that, follow that, learn how we designed and built the boat. I designed it. It's a 1969 Piver trimaran that I've converted to a 100% solar-powered yacht. And so when I'm not working on my boat, I try to help Uncle Sam or whoever is an ally do whatever they need to do to take care of the bad guys.
Lee, do you see things getting pretty serious here over the next 10, 15 years? Like, let's just say even over the next 5 years, as far as weather, possibility of crop shortages, flooding, drought, etc.?
Oh, absolutely. If you look at the grand solar minimum and the decrease in the solar activity that we've seen, you read the book from John Casey, Upheaval, Dark Winter. You look at the increase in galactic cosmic rays that we've got coming into the atmosphere and how that creates additional nucleation within the atmosphere and blocks more of the sunlight coming in. Our jet stream is changing. We're seeing the earliest snows and the latest snows ever. I mean, it's snowing today in the Midwest. And, you know, I've been predicting this for 3 years and we're seeing exactly what I've been predicting. So, you know, I follow it very, very closely. I speak with many farmers because I was raised on a farm and, you know a lot of large agricultural people. And we talk about it and we're all aware of it. We all see it coming. Those of us who are paying attention see it. And if you look at Heinrich Svensmark's work, Dr. Kirkby from CERN, Valentina Zarkova and the magnetic fields of the sun going out of phase over our next two solar cycles. Between now and 2020, the Earth's temperature is going to continue to drop dramatically. In fact, if you look at it just since Trump came in office, the last 18 months, the global surface temperatures have dropped dramatically. I think we've dropped by 0.84 degrees Celsius just in the last 18 months. So that's significant. That's, you know, basically almost 2 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's going to make a huge change. I mean, we're already seeing it. So we'll continue to.
You know, out here in Southern Colorado, I just moved here a few months ago from San Antonio, and living out there for almost 10 years with some pretty warm summers in the 100, 105, 107 sometimes. Most of the podcasts that I did were in the garage. It seemed like it was even hotter in there. Now I'm coming to some pretty cold temperatures, but it snowed just yesterday in the mountains. I think a couple of days before that. That's probably normal out here, or seems to be more normal as far as those circumstances are concerned. But it's definitely interesting to see what is going to unfold and the projections about the crop losses and shortages. David Devine has done some good information on that. It must be nice to have a yacht that's off grid. Now, that yacht that you've got together, it's not like it's a very elaborate yacht. It's something that's built and designed to withstand extreme storms, correct?
Yeah. So what we've done is it's a trimaran. It was a 1969 Piver 40-foot Victress.
It's a trimaran.
Yeah.
With
It's a 40-foot Victress is what it was designed as far as the hull, but the floor plan inside of it is from a 53-foot Empress. So the cabin is much larger on the inside. It has 2 staterooms in each one of the yamas, which are, I mean, a trimaran is like 3 boats, literally. It's a big boat in the middle with 2 smaller boats on either, one smaller boat on either side. And so those smaller boats on each side have what's called a wing, and you go out to that boat on the outside, which is actually called an ama. And if you go forward, there's an estate room, or if you go to the aft or the rear, there's another estate room on both sides. And in the middle, there's a large salon. To the forward of that, we have a galley, and then up in the front, we have a large storage V-berth area. And then behind that, we've built up the cockpit and a masterhead and laundry room and engine room and battery room and so on and so forth in the stern. And so what we've done is we've beefed up the boat, and then we have filled everything below the water line with foam. So is that it's basically impossible to sink the boat. You can go into a hole with a machine gun and empty a clip through the floor, and the boat won't go down because the hole, everything below the water line is solid foam. So, you know, the water will come up to the floor, but it won't come in because the foam is deeper than the water. So it's impossible to sink it, basically. You have to burn it down if you ever want to make it sink.
Hey, that reminds me of Boston Whaler. Back in the day, I sold Boston Whalers for a while. That was fun. The unsinkable boats, you could cut those in half, and then you'd have two pieces that would float. That's fascinating. I think that's really exciting. And to be that mobile, I think that with as much of the oceans and such, what a great way to set up for off the grid. And then if you can do some kind of communication system to where you can communicate with people on land, but be able to support yourself in the ocean. That's fascinating. Have you ever, and folks, in a minute, we're going to get into this experience that Lee had with a unidentified flying object. Maybe it's identified now. We're going to talk about that in a minute because this is fascinating. I've shared a couple of my own experiences, but we're going to get into that in a minute. But first, I just want to ask about, have you ever thought about even going around the world, like doing a full circumvection, all around, just completely cyclical?
Absolutely. That was what my plan was to do after I had built this boat. Originally, what I was trying to do was just prove that solar was a viable energy solution for yachts of people who are cruisers. Because if you have a large solar array and you use a wider boat like a trimaran, you can put a pretty substantial solar array up there. You can put some pretty substantial batteries in a boat, and you can cruise around because the normal cruiser only goes like 20 to 30 miles a day. So, you've got plenty of power. You can cruise where you want. You can run your air conditioner, your ice maker, so on and so forth. And that's what the purpose of it was to prove that you could take an old boat and convert it into something that's state of the art and runs off the sun. And you can run for thousands and thousands of hours and not use a drop of fuel, a drop of oil, and not be contaminating the planet while you're doing it, by noise, by oil, by exhaust, or anything. You're all green. And it's wonderful because you're riding along and you don't hear anything but the water slapping against the side of the boat.
Wow, that's cool. That is so cool. And why not? I mean, it makes sense. Good luck with that. I hope you keep us posted, and maybe you can start doing some live feeds out in the middle of the ocean. And if you ever do go around the world, what a great way that would be to, show it to the flat earthers out there. But I'm sure they'd have some excuse to say how you didn't do it. Fascinating, fascinating. So let's get it. What are you showing us, Diamond? Are you going to show us some charts here, or do you want to get into the inconvenient truth? This is the electric blue solar yacht. This is your project.
That's a picture. That's a picture of it. I mocked up for when Lee and I did a radio show about 6 months back. But you could see the solar panel on top. Yeah. And you can see Lee here levitating in the middle. But that gives you an idea of the trimaran. And he, also, I wanted to chime in. Lee is trying to teach people how to do this. And he set up a Patreon page so that you can donate a monthly amount and follow along. He posts pretty often a couple small videos moving in and out of dry dock and stuff as they fix this up. So definitely support him on Patreon. Go over there and look for the electric blue solar yacht if you're interested in making your own bug out trimaran like Lee.
That's epic. I so want one of those. I mean, you almost look like Optimus Prime in that picture, Lee.
Yeah, I see that. And as you can see, it's 40 foot long. It's 24 foot wide, so it's a pretty good sized boat. So it's not bad. It's actually larger than my first apartment. So I'm pretty happy with it. It's, and it handles the waves. You don't want to go too much larger. If you go much over 45 feet in a trimaran, you get problems going down through troughs and heavy seas. So the 40 to 45 foot is actually about the best length for a trimaran if anybody's looking for one.
Oh yeah, that's great. Now you could probably find these used for what, $10,000-$15,000 and then build them how you want to.
Yeah, it depends upon how rough a shape it is. It's going to be for $10,000. It's going to be in really, really rough shape. A decent one's going to probably start you in about $50,000. And if you don't have, $250,000 to $300,000 and a bunch of time to do it, then don't even start it, because when you talk about the number of batteries that you need, the number of solar panels you need, the charge controllers, the controllers for the motors, the sonar, the air conditioners, the propulsion, the radar, the navigational charts, and all that other stuff, all that adds up really, really, really quick. So, it's not a cheap endeavor. We've spent way more on this than we thought we were going to. But then again, some of the people who were supposed to support this didn't. So basically, my wife and I have funded this entire yacht to this point, and a few friends.
Now, you've got a YouTube channel. So, folks, I'm going to leave the link to Lee's YouTube channel as well as Diamond's in the video description box. And definitely keep updated on the Electric Blue Solar Yacht Project, the ultimate survival vehicle system. And hopefully you've got a couple submarines under there and a solar jetpack that might help you in case you need to go from point A to point B. Solar jetpacks, those are pretty exciting. But hey, so let's talk about can we talk about this experience that you had, Lee? This
Sure.
UFO experience, this just incredible experience. I'm really excited to hear about this.
So back in 1980, when I was going to high school, I lived in a small town in Virginia. And one night, my Uncle Sam and my cousin Dennis, and they're going to kill me for saying their names on this show because I've never said their names on a show before. I've told this story many times on many shows over the years. But anyway, we went coon hunting. And so we went down by the river, and we had let the dogs out of the truck. We had an old Chevy pickup truck. And it was the female dog was Sally, and the other dog was Blue. And Sally had pups probably about 4 weeks earlier. And when we let her out of the truck, she was acting really weird. I mean, she was just growling at everybody and wouldn't go hunt or anything. And Blue's just standing there like, what's going on? And, nobody knew what was going on. So my Uncle Sam said, look, y'all go over to the field. She just had pups. I don't know if she's going to fight y'all or what. So he says, y'all just go over to the field. So we walked over to the edge of the cornfield, and we're just standing there, and the dog just keeps growling and won't go hunt. So we just keep looking around up at the sky and all the stars, and all of a sudden we see this little bright white light way up in the sky. And it doesn't look like a star. It actually looks like, you know, a helicopter landing light way up in the sky. And we're like, wow, you know, that's way up there for a helicopter to be up there with a landing light, because, you know, it wasn't moving like a jet or anything. It was just like kind of hanging there, but, you know, it looked kind of like it was slowly moving towards us. So we're sitting there watching this thing, you know, and my cousin Dennis yells over to Sam, hey, Sam, you know, come look at this thing. So Sam comes walking over, and we're all standing there looking at it, and it just keeps coming down out of the sky. And it just looks like it's just getting a little bit brighter and a little bit bigger in diameter. And still, it looks like a helicopter landing light, but, you know, it's getting to the point of where it's not lighting up the ground by any means, but you can see that it's getting closer, and you're like, you know, you should start to be hearing this thing, but you still don't hear anything, and it still keeps coming down. Well, then, and the reason this is taking so long is because this entire episode took me like 20 minutes for this whole thing. So it kept coming down, and the closer it got as it come down, we noticed that it wasn't actually a single point of light. Now it started to look like a really, really small circle of light. And we're like, well, that's weird. So it kept coming down, getting closer and closer as it continued to descend. And then we noticed that, yeah, it is a circle of light. And the circle of light is getting bigger. And, you know, and so it continues to come down. And as it's coming down, there were some stars in the sky, and it would move across in front of the stars. And when it would move across in front of the stars, you could see the star in the middle of it. And I'm like, oh my God, look at that. And they're like, wow, because that's the moment that we realized it wasn't a solid object. It was a ring, like a ring on your finger. And so I was like, holy mackerel, look at this thing. So it's continuing to come down, and it comes down so as that it's like, you know, we're not looking straight up, but it's in front of us and up high in the sky. And the thing is monstrous, and it has 4 layers to it. So there's 2 layers on the lower half of it, and there's 2 layers on the upper half of it. And the windows are not symmetrically shaped. They're not all the same shape. They're either squares or rectangles, and there are no round windows on it. And the windows are large. They go from basically the floor to the ceiling on each one of these floors, and the windows don't go all the way around. They're broken up on each one of these layers, but every window that is on it, and that's the light that we were seeing, every window on it has a white light that is just the purest white light. It's not like a blue LED. It's just a pure, it's just a pure white light. Like, you know, if you died and white is, and there's no shapes or anything that you see through the windows of this thing. You just see the white squares or panels on the outside of it. So it comes down and it hovers basically over top of us, and then slowly starts moving across the horizon. And it's, if at arm's length, it's about the size of a very thick, heavy men's wedding ring, size 12 or 14 wedding ring. That's how big it is in the sky to us, but it's still huge up there. And when it actually got down to the point of where you could see it right there in the sky, everything around us went quiet. Even the dogs looked up to see this thing in the sky. There were no crickets. There were no frogs. There's a creek behind us. There was a pond next to us. The frogs shut up. The crickets stopped. The only thing you could hear was the water babbling down the creek, and us sitting there going, oh my God, what is that thing? And so then it started slowly moving from right to left across the sky. And I calculated it because I've studied this many, many, many times and for hours on end trying to figure out what this thing was. And so then it moved across, and we estimated that the flight path of it moving from right to left across our horizon was about 6,000 feet of its flight path across. And then it started going back up into the sky. And then when it accelerated up into the sky, it disappeared in a matter of like 5 seconds. So what had taken almost 7 minutes for that thing to come all the way down to us, and then, 5-10 minutes for it to move across in front of us, and then stop and hover and then take off back up into space, 15 to 20 minutes total for the whole thing. It accelerated out and was gone. And so every day that I could learn anything about any type of aircraft or spacecraft or UFO or anything after that, I went right after it because I wanted to know what this thing was. And my cousin Dennis and my Uncle Sam, they started talking about it, but everybody in the community laughed at them and made fun of them and jokes. So they would never talk about it again. And to this day, I can say to them, do you remember that night? And their response to me will be, I don't want to talk about it, because they know exactly that night. There is no other that night. We hunted many, many nights together, but that night is that night. And so it wasn't until 13 years later, when I was working at Fort Benning, Georgia, and my boss, I was senior technologist at the Dismantled Battlespace Battle Lab at Fort Benning, which is now the Maneuver Center of Excellence. And so I got called into my boss's office, and he said, hey, I got a new technology that I want you to look at. And I looked down on the desk, and here was this rubber thing that was about as big around as a peanut can and was basically almost the exact same shape as this spacecraft I had seen. And I looked down at that and said, what is that? And he said, well, it's good that you asked, because that's your next project. And I was like, okay. And he goes, the guys are out front. You can go out there and talk to them. But this is what you're working on now. I'm like, okay. So I go out there. It's a ring foil. And the thing about a ring foil is if you turn it sideways, so is that the open end is facing the direction that the object is moving, the ring foil is moving, it will actually rotate in the air and spiral like a football does. And it holds level flight through the air until it gets to the point of where it just drops out of the sky. And it's because of the way that the air flows through it. And so if you think about space travel and you say, okay, well, I've got to be able to come in through different types of atmospheres, and I want to be able to do that with the minimum amount of resistance. Perfect. I want to fly horizontally through that atmosphere and maintain the same gravity. Great. You have the vessel or the spacecraft rotate. So now as you're flying through space, you've got this giant ring, and that giant ring is rotating, and that's creating artificial gravity inside that craft as it moves through space, just like NASA will have to do. Now, the craziest thing about all of this is that if you look at the new Apple building that they call the spaceship, it is almost the exact same size and almost the exact same dimensions as what I saw that night back in 1980. And so I have been now studying that particular building and looking at how they've done the windows on it, and the windows that they've put on the roof of that building were the same type windows as what I was seeing on the side when I saw the spacecraft. So I am convinced that whoever the architect was, or whoever told the architect to design that building, saw the exact same thing I did. Because when you look at the sides of it and you look at it's the 4 stories and everything, I mean, it's almost identical. There's a few cosmetic changes on the outside of it different than what I saw, but they're very minuscule compared to the overall structure, the width, the height, the dimensions, the size. I mean, it's just absolutely amazing. And then to come to find out that they named the thing the spaceship, which is what blows my mind. So that's my story.
Now, first, I apologize. We're having a little bit of an internet connection issue here, so there was a delay. And I think that that's just incredible. I wanted to ask what year that happened. So what year did that happen that you saw that?
I saw
and
that
where do you think they came from? Who do you think they are?
I have no idea where they came from. I have no idea of any of that. All I know is that I saw it in November or December of 1980. Still with me, Rex?
Yeah, I think we lost him.
Barely. No, the gremlins now are coming out in full force. 90% of what you said I didn't hear. Just froze up. So this happens every time it gets exciting. I seriously think I need my own satellite connection here, because no matter what I've done thus far, there's always gremlin issues. I'll get a new computer, same thing. Folks, I didn't hear what you just said. Hopefully they did. I think that Diamond heard you. I think that everybody else heard you but myself. So they're going to come out and say, Rex, your computer's messed up. All right, fine. I'll get another computer. Let's see if it keeps happening. But did everybody else hear okay? Because I didn't hear it.
It was loud and clear on my end.
Yeah, November, December of 1980.
Okay, December of 1980. And you say you don't know. I mean, where do you think that they came from? Do you think that they are us? Do you think they're from another planet? I mean,
I have no idea. All I know is what we saw that night, and it's one of the most vivid memories I have in my life of seeing that, and then the quest that's where it's gotten me to where I am now. Is basically that. I don't want to call it an epiphany moment, but definitely a life altering moment when you see that, and then that instills into you this need to know, what was it, how did it get here, why was it shaped that way, and then to have to, if it wouldn't have been for me having that job at Fort Benning as a senior technologist, I still would not have known what the shape was, or that realized that was a ring foil. Only through me having that job did I even understand why it was shaped that way. And then once I figured out, or was explained to how the aerodynamics of a ring foil work, then I was like, oh my God, no wonder it was this shape. I mean, it just makes perfect sense. So that's what has astounded me when people say, oh, it's a spaceship and it looks like two saucers together and it's the size of a car. Well, it may be, but it came from something a hell of a lot bigger. Yeah.
What is this you're putting on the screen? Diamond, let me unmute you. Did you put this on here? Is this similar to what you saw, Lee?
Yeah,
No.
Just a picture so you can comment on it.
Yeah, that's what everybody says that a spaceship looks like. If you take the witness of people who were at the Roswell incident, this is the shape of what they said that they saw there. There's a lot of people who have said that Roswell didn't happen. Roswell did happen. You don't haul a weather balloon away on a flatbed truck. You can haul a weather balloon away in the trunk of your car. And you don't have 100 men scouring through the woods or through the desert for 3 days looking for something if it's a weather balloon. So, there have been a lot of cases that the government's tried to cover up and say, no, it didn't happen or what have you. But these things have happened. And, Roswell's one of the things that some of my friends have confirmed have happened. And then there's, been plenty of other investigations. There was one it was in 1984 that was about 140 miles outside of London in, I think it's Sherwood or something like that, or no, excuse me, Woodbridge. And so the largest interceptor base in Europe is there. It's a joint base. It's two separate bases. They're separated by some woods. But the first time that the U.S. Air Force actually ever documented electronically an encounter with some type of alien craft was there in 1984 or 1988. And a craft came down and a major went out with some of his men and actually recorded what they saw. And they thought they were only gone for about 45 minutes to an hour. Come to find out they were gone for over 4 hours, and 3 hours was unaccounted for. And so they came back in, they made a report of it. Lots of people saw it. And so they said, okay, this is the report. So he gave the report the following day, and his commanding officers didn't believe him. Well, sure enough, that night it came back again. So his commanding officers went out. He was a lieutenant colonel, and I can't remember what the executive officer he had with him, what his name was. But anyway, so they went out with Geiger counters because they had known that it had been there before. And they went and saw it again. And they took a night vision scope out with them and saw it and recorded it with a night vision scope. Well, they wrote a letter that went to the Ministry of Defense in England, and they sat on it for 3 years. So some people found out about it, they released it, and then this lieutenant colonel who had witnessed it the second time was inundated by news reports about this UFO encounter that he had had there. But there was true evidence of that. And so when they found out about the time missing and they found out about these other things that were going on, the British shut it down and said, no, we don't want to have anything to do with it. Well, then the U.S. government was put in to say, okay, well, we're going to try to dismiss this, that this wasn't real either. So they had an investigator come in and investigate it. But the problem with the investigator is he said that it was a lighthouse and so on and so forth, and that the night vision tube had 100,000 light gain on it. Well, that's not true. It had 5,000 light gain at best in 1988, 10,000 maybe. So it didn't have 100,000 light gain. And so his investigation was incorrect. Then we had another encounter it was in Belgium, it was part of the Belgian wave, and they launched F-16 fighters against those. And that was, again, indisputable, because the Belgian military tried to say, no, it didn't happen, even though we have the radar logs from the aircraft, we have the radar logs from the ground station. And people tried to say, oh, it's an anomaly, that didn't happen, it was weather related. Well, there's a problem with that. And that is, if you have a weather related anomaly show up on your radar, it'll show up on one station, but it doesn't normally show up on another radar station at the same time, because it's an anomaly for one station. But if you have an attack radar from 2 F-16 fighter jets that are tracking a target, which they had on visible, you can see it on their thermal displays, you can see it on their tracking radar, the craft would go from 150 knots all the way up to 990 knots in under 3 seconds. So it would accelerate unbelievably. And so the Belgian military decided that, we're going to have our specialists in radar try to debunk this. And then they said it was unfounded because, that's what they said. The problem is that when you look at the radar tracks of the F-16s and you look at the radar tracks of the ground stations, on track number 9 of when the F-16s were tracking that target, both the ground station and the F-16s were tracking the exact same target at the exact same time. That is not an anomaly. So they cannot say that it's an anomaly, because there's 3 separate radar systems tracking the exact same target, 2 airborne and 1 ground-based. So that is, the people who tried to dismiss that, that's blowing their claims out of the water. We've got the radar, we've got all that other stuff. Then there was another episode in Ottawa, Canada, I think it is, where law enforcement, a young boy who was 14 years old, saw a spacecraft floating outside, woke his parents up because it was at 10 o'clock at night, woke up his parents, they came out and saw it. The mother then called the police department. Law enforcement came out, multiple police officers saw it. They contacted a local radar station. That radar station also confirmed that there were objects in the same area at the same time. There were 3 of these. They were huge. They have recordings of all of those phone calls. Then they tried to get a guy from the U.S., can't remember what his name was. The U.S. government brought him in. He tried to debunk it and say, oh, it was the sunset refracting off of the clouds, and that's what was causing the light in the sky. Well, there's a little problem with that. At 10 o'clock at night in Ottawa, Canada, it's dark. There ain't no sunset. So you're not going to have beams reflecting off of the water, bouncing back up into the sky. So his attempt to dispute it was blown out of the water, because you don't have sunset at 10 p.m. in Ottawa, Canada. So there was a lot of these people have tried to debunk these things, or the government is asking to, or you've had people who are impartial. It's just like the Project Blue Book from 1941 through 1969. Project Blue Book cataloged 15,000 different UFO sightings just in the United States. And the Russians, as far as spotting UFOs, their records go all the way back to the 1800s. So, people have been seeing things in the sky for a long, long time. When you look at all the planets and the stars and so on and so forth that are out there, and you think about the possibilities of life, it's kind of hard to not believe that there is not something else out there. In fact, it's way more likely that there is something out there than there isn't. So I'll give it back to you there, Rex, there, Diamond.
Now, that's fascinating, and thank you for sharing that information. And also, I would wonder if, for example, many of these petroglyphs that have been left to show us maybe what happened in history. Have you had a chance to correlate any of the data or the ancient Sumerian cuneiform tablets, or have you read through anything that would make you feel, yes, that kind of correlate with what you have seen and what other people have reported? Have you seen any of the stuff that the Diamond and I have recently reported on with those petroglyphs in the Four Corners region?
Yeah, so the one petroglyph of the squatting man, that is actually, when you look at Dave Talbot's work from Electric Universe Theory, that's the side view of a plasma sphere. And that's the arms and the legs and the plasma and the anode and the cathode in there is what creates that standing man or squatting man image. And so we see that in plasma. And then when you look back at some of the other carvings, some of the carvings actually show men in spacesuits that look just like spacesuits. And then there's other carvings that have the side profile view of high-speed boats, like a Mark V attack boat that the U.S. Navy SEALs use. And then there's an image of what looks just like a UH-60 Black Hawk helicopter from the side view. And when you look at these things and you look at the symmetry of them and how they go together, and the fact that, gee, that does look just like a rotor blade on top of that, and that is the right length, and so is the tail boom for the counter torque of a blade that size. And you think, they lived in the same atmosphere that we did, basically, and had to deal with the exact same laws of physics that we have to deal with. And we know that the Earth has been around a long, long, long time, So I believe that there were many, many civilizations and advanced civilizations that came before our current, what we call advanced civilization. And so when you see it in these images and things that they've carved on the walls, it does look like either aliens came or we were really, really advanced and were able to have our own space suits and Black Hawk helicopters. So, and then, there's also the possibility for the change in the sun as well. And that's what would explain seeing that dancing man or squatting man in one of those petroglyphs.
Lee, can you see the lizard man that I just put up?
Yes.
What are your thoughts on this? This is also in the Four Corners region. And in fact, there are some 2,000 and 8,000-year-old statues in the Far East and in Turkey of similar creatures.
Yeah, and I believe that there were other creatures on this planet other than the ones that we know about, and we just haven't found them all. I mean, we're still finding species of things, and and then there are things that they have hidden over the years. I mean, look at all the giants that have been found around all over the planet that everybody hides. There are people, they just found one here not too long ago that's 34 foot tall. There's 8 people standing next to that thing, and they're not even touching shoulder to shoulder. So, we know that we've had these giants on the planet. We know we've had these other species or so on and so forth. We know we had, prior to humans as we know it, we had other species of human, Homo erectus and so on and so forth prior to us. So, there is an evolution of, different species on the planet. And then there is the possibility of interaction from other places, because look at the DNA of an octopus. From what I know, there's not, somebody said something the other day about they had found something else that was related to an octopus, but I'm not aware of anything else on the planet that shares the same DNA as an octopus. Are you guys?
No, I'm not. And I've heard that before. And I also want to ask you, this has just been going through my mind. And before I forget, you've worked with many organizations within the government. You've been, a big part of keeping the troops safe and working with technologies. Like you said, you would kind of compare yourself to the gentleman that made a lot of those crafty technologies for James Bond. So ETs and Men in Black and the possibility of there being something above people's pay grade. And it seems like even people that have very high positions of power, they are compartmentalized to a very large degree. So it's like, even though somebody is super brilliant, they have tons of information, they're still missing major components. And it's like, where does that end? Who is at the top of this? And I often wonder, if it's clandestine, I call them the dungeon masters or whatever they are, but it doesn't seem like they're human sometimes. I mean, it just doesn't seem like they have our best interests at heart when you look at many of these corporations that just make so much money off of pillaging the earth. And also you look at the toxins and chemicals in a lot of these products that people consume on a regular basis. And yes, there's controversial data to go back and forth that says it's safe and you can get into the percentage point. But in all reality, all you really need to do is you look at a picture from 70 years ago and you look at the way people looked back then overall in masses compared to the way people look now. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to see that a lot of people are dealing with dis-ease and they're unhealthy because of the products that they're consuming and their lifestyle. So, I mean, do you think that there could be an extraterrestrial race or something that controls this planet? And if so, I mean, are Men in Black real? I mean, what's the deal with that? And I know I've asked you a whole bunch of questions and you're one person that can absolutely keep up with this. And I'd love to get your take on this.
Well, I don't think that extraterrestrials interact with us on a daily basis like in the movie Men in Black. I will tell you that there are people within the government that deal with spooky crap no matter what it is. So, and they clean it up however they need to do so. But as far as, actually seeing a spaceship or something of that nature, it's as easy as getting a good thermal imager. So they make these Thor weapon sights. They make these other type of weapon sights. Anybody that has a good thermal imager, take it out on a cool, clear night when it's totally dark, there's nothing else flying around. Take that thermal imager and look at the moon with it and focus it perfectly on the moon to get the best focus on the moon that you can. And then just start looking around up in the sky. And you will be amazed at what you see some nights moving across the sky that are not aircraft and are not satellites. I've taken thermal imagers out and looked up in the sky at night, seen diamonds and triangles and rectangle objects moving across the sky much faster than any low Earth orbit satellite, much faster than any aircraft going across. And you can actually see them glistening with the thermal imager. They're not putting off a huge thermal signature. It's easy to spot an aircraft. An aircraft will be pretty bright on the thermal imager. These objects are not very bright on the thermal imager, and you've got to have basically your focus set at infinity to see them because they're so high up in the atmosphere. So that's what you have to focus on is the moon to get your focus correct to be able to focus on them. Because if you've got it focused on something at the ground and you look up in the sky, you'll never see them because you're out of focus for that distance. The only way I saw them for the first time, which was by accident, I was actually looking at the moon with the thermal imager and saw one fly between me and the moon. And I was like, what the hell was that? And started tracking it. So they're there. So all you got to do is get yourself a thermal imager or find somebody that has a high powered thermal imager and go out and look, and you can record them and see them yourself.
They're demons. They're demons from Planet X, Lonk. Yeah. We must fight them.
Hey, no, Lee, could we live stream a thermal imager live? Could we set it up somehow and go outside and?
Absolutely. So you can get a thermal imager and you can get a video out from a thermal imager. And take that, and now you got to have a high-powered thermal imager. You can't have something that's only got like an 8x zoom on it. You won't see them. You got to have like a 20 or a 25x zoom on that thermal because the objects are so far away that's what it takes to be able to get them in the field of view. Otherwise, they just look like a flicker on the screen. You can't make them out. So you got to have a optical zoom and then a digital zoom on top of that to be able to see them. But you can buy them. They're like $8,000.
Let me ask you a question, Lee. I just picked up a Nikon. It's a Nikon P1000, and if you for $1,000, this thing has equivalent to a 3,000 millimeter zoom lens. It's got 125 optical zoom, and I can get some amazing close-ups on the moon. And the thermal imager that you're talking about, is there a way to add like a piece to the camera?
No, so it has a video.
What's that?
It has a video out. You can stream the video straight out of it, just like a regular video camera.
Yeah, it's got a video out, but you can hook that up to like a thermal imager.
Yes, you can take the thermal imager. The thermal imager itself will have a video out on it. Then you can take that video out just like a regular old surveillance camera, and you can plug it into a DVR. You can plug it into your computer. You can plug it into your TV. You can plug it into whatever you want. And so if you get a 3 to 5 or 8 to 12 micron thermal imager and look up there, or a SWIR, which is a shortwave infrared, and look up, and you've got a decent magnification on it, you can see things flying around up there that do not show up on the Kepler 2 line elements that the Air Force tracks.
Wow. Awesome. Ladies and gentlemen, did you hear that? That is going to be the next adventure, or one of the next adventures here at the Leak Project. Is I don't know if we're going to be able to put together $8,000 for one of those imagers, but maybe we can get something that will be able to work with this camera and find some exciting stuff. Now, this was a picture that was drawn artist's impression many years ago, I think in the 1400s in China. And I'm wondering if they were seeing these craft that many people see now. Now, I want to say what I've personally seen is I have seen this rod-shaped UFO twice, and it was in Utah, and it was over a period of twice within 7 days. It was over like one on a Saturday, then the next Saturday. The first time I saw it, I was by myself. I was going up to visit my grandpa in northern Utah. I was on the freeway, and I saw this rod-shaped UFO. Then a week later, I was with one of my coworkers heading towards Moab on the freeway, and we both saw the same thing as well. And it was way out there. I mean, it was way out there. But then just the other day, when I interviewed Travis Walton, Fire in the Sky, I was with my wife. We were just, less than 2 miles from the house here in Southern Colorado. And it was at 10:25 a.m. It was so cool. I had never seen anything this close and this just in your face. It was a metallic orb. And I don't think the thing was more than 300 feet. My wife saw the exact same thing, and it would be at about the 11 o'clock position. And then I looked up these, I just typed in metallic orbs on Google to see what else was out there. And there's a lot of the same things. So what are these things, man?
Well, some of them are actually small balloons that are called aerostats. And then some of them, there's actually one that kind of looks like a comet. And the thing is huge. In fact, it takes 2 tractor trailer loads of helium to fill it up. It's over $44,000 worth of helium to fill it. And so what they were supposed to be global surveillance platforms, and they were supposed to be able to articulate because they're so long. They have generators and everything on them. They're like I said, it's like a giant comet looking thing. And so they would launch them, and they were supposed to be able to go up and actually float around the earth and be able to manipulate their height and their direction by articulating and making them bend and move into the wind. It could actually swim kind of like in the wind from the way they would articulate and take gas in and out of the cylinders on it. So there's a lot of people that have seen that thought it was a UFO, but it's actually not. It's that individual balloon system that was developed by a team out in Colorado. And then there's another system, which is the aerostats, that are the ones that tie on. They're smaller. That's like an orb, like what you're talking about. And they're actually a shiny, really light blue and give a silvery effect. And they're flown around Utah, Colorado, and areas up in there, because in Utah, you have the Dugway Proving Grounds. And what they do is they put air sondes on the line. And so they'll send it way up in the air and have these sensors on the line going up to it. And then they'll do a biological release that will float through it. And then they'll take samples of that all the way up that altitude and do that. So they do that. If you're anywhere around Dugway, you'll see those there. And then the last one is called Combat SkySat. Now, Combat SkySat is the same as a small aerostat, or if you look up the Army's project, a blimp in a box or a balloon in a box. The Combat SkySat is basically that exact same balloon, except for it's not tethered. And hanging on the bottom side of that, it has a little styrofoam cooler that has a lithium battery in it and a couple crossband radios, a GPS, and some other electronics that allow it to drop ballast out of it so as that it can change its altitude as well. And then it's got a burn ring in, so when they want to come back down, they can burn it and pretty much land it pretty much where they want in a general area. They calculate all that. And that will fly as high as 74,000 feet. So, and they'll use that in a theater of operation. They'll go way upwind and let the thing go, and it'll operate over that theater for hours and hours and hours at a time. So as that the combat soldiers on the battlefield have communications back and forth if they don't have satellite communications or anything else. And it allows them to use a radio rather than a great big satellite receiver. It's a whole lot better for them, and they can transmit data and everything else through it. So those are the three that are the main ones that the Army and the Air Force are playing with. Combat SkySat is Air Force, and a blimp in a box is Army.
No, wow, that's incredible. Thank you for sharing that. Tons of data here, folks. I mean, this is fantastic. We've got a nice crowd here. I want to thank everybody for being here with us. I want to thank you, Lee. I want to thank you, Diamond. Also, I mean, so what do you think it was then with the information that I gave you? I saw it at 10:25 a.m. Here in Southern Colorado, about 25 minutes from where Diamond lives. And it was right there. It was probably about 300 to 400 feet in the air is my estimate. So out of all of the,
did it move at all?
Well, here's the cool thing. So it was, I mean, maybe it was, it kind of looked like it was just sitting there. I saw it. I grabbed my camera. I've got my Nikon right next to me. I grabbed my camera. It's at the stop sign. Go to take a picture of it. It's gone. And then Kristen, she said, she says what she saw. She describes the same thing. And then she goes, do you kind of wonder if these things can read your mind? Because just a few days prior to that, Lee, we were out in the Archuleta Mesa area, where the Dulce, New Mexico, and there's a lot of conspiracies, a lot of speculation about what's out there. Clearly the information is all around the board, and people can say all sorts of different things, but there's something going on out there. But anyway, just a couple of days prior, we were out there, and right when we got to the mesa, where I to start taking some pictures, as I go to pull over, we see this reflective light that looks like it's off of some type of craft. I don't know what it was. It was going really slow. And then I go to take a picture and it's gone. And so within just a few days, we see these two things. So I don't know what they were, but do you think there was some type of surveillance for military, or what would be your best guess on that?
I can't really say, because if you had a picture of it, I could tell you more. But just if it was gone when you looked back, it's not a combat combat SkySat, and it wouldn't be a blimp in a box, because a blimp in a box is tethered, and so it may move 1,000 feet, from one side of the tether to the other, or 3,000 feet at most, depends on how much tether you got out. So it'll have moving back and forth in a wind. It can move 3,000 feet. They have a sail though. If you look at not a combat SkySat, but a blimp in the box. On a blimp in the box on the back side, you can always tell, because it's got like a little skirt that hangs down on the back side of it, and that is to keep the blimp level when the wind is blowing against it. So is that the surveillance payload on the bottom stays level, and the blimp doesn't get in the way of blocking the view when the wind's blowing really hard. Because as you know, a balloon goes over to an angle when you can't see through it. So you want the balloon to be directly over top of the surveillance payload. So that's how you can always spot a blimp in a box, is it's got a little skirt on the back side of it, which comes down basically just around the back half of it, around the equatorial region of the balloon. And it comes together in a V, and that V attaches to the bottom of the balloon about 20 feet, 10 feet below the bottom of the balloon. That makes it really easy. I wish had known we were going to talk about the combat skies, or these. I got pictures of them. I used to teach people how to fly them, so I've got I can tell you all about them.
Wow, that's incredible. That is absolutely incredible. And I just want to clarify myself, folks. A minute ago, I said that image was from China. I was wrong. This was a mass sighting in Nuremberg in 1561, April 4th. So I'll leave a link specifically for that. Discs and spheres were said to emerge from large cylinders. And this is a collection in Zurich. This is incredible. Wow. So, a lot of stuff that people see could actually be, it's a UFO. It could be, they're thinking it's an extraterrestrial craft or something. It could be just some highly advanced stuff that we have. And did you read the Guy Hostel papers from 1950 that are available fbi.gov/vault that are declassified now, where they described how there was 3 beings in each craft that they found in Roswell? And they were about 3 feet tall, they said, but they didn't say if they were aliens or not. They just said 3 beings about 3 feet tall with metallic clothing.
Yes. and they are confirmed. I have had somebody confirm that there are 3 beings and parts from that still in U.S. government inventory.
Hello. So can we talk more about that? Can we talk more about that? That's fascinating. I'd love to hear about this. I mean, this is awesome.
Yeah. So let me chime in real quick. Lee and I talk a lot, and the other day he reveals to me that he saw a UFO when he was young first, that ring disc he talked about earlier. And then we're chatting today, and he's like, oh yeah, this guy, he saw bodies. And I'm like, bodies of what? And he's like, alien bodies. They're in inventory, which is why we're having this podcast now, because we got to hear what he's got to say.
Well, so I have a friend of mine who was a spooky guy for a number of years. And as he got older, he was still in government service, and he had an extremely high security clearance, but he wasn't field grade material anymore. He had matured past that. So he wanted to move on to something else. So he got moved over to a audit inventory organization of the government that inventories high security items. And so one day he came to me and said, because he's known me for a long time, and he came to me and he said, Lee, do you believe in UFOs? I said, no, I don't believe in them. I know they're UFOs. He's like, good, because most people would never believe what I'm about to tell you. And I'm like, what's that? And he goes, they're real. And I'm like, yeah. And he goes, no, really, I saw the bodies. And I'm like, what do you mean you saw the bodies? He goes, dude, when I was doing the inventory, they've got them in inventory. They still got them. They're, after all these years, they're still in inventory. And I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, well, this stuff gets inventoried every year. And he said, when I was doing the inventory or the audit of the inventory, I had to go around, and when I was going down through the list, one of the things said bodies, 3. And I'm like, okay. And he goes, and when I went back and checked, it's what it is. And he's like, I couldn't believe it, and he's like, you're the only person that, I know I could talk to about this that probably wouldn't think it was crazy. And I'm like, well, no, dude, I don't think you're crazy at all. Because when you look and you investigate what the Army did after the so-called Roswell incident of the weather balloon, it doesn't hold with what you would do if a weather balloon was on the ground. You don't send hundreds of men out there into the desert. You don't send great big trucks to haul things away. You don't have guys with metal detectors and, and all kinds of other people out there. You don't call the local funeral home and look for caskets, ask for 3 child's caskets, because they didn't have one in Roswell. The funeral director told me on the interview, told the people in the interview, he only had one of these caskets that was child size, and they wanted to know how soon in the Air Force Base, it was who called and wanted to know how soon that he could get 2 more. So there's all kinds of things that show that it wasn't a weather balloon, because it was a weather balloon, it would have been some guys out there in a Jeep, and they would have thrown the instruments in the back of the Jeep and folded the weather balloon up and stuck it underneath the instruments and drove back in. And you wouldn't have had pieces of metal that you couldn't bend, and pieces of metal that you couldn't destroy, and pieces of metal with weird markings on them, because there's too many witnesses, there's too many trucks, there's too many people, there's too much activity for a weather balloon.
I want to know where these things come from, and I want to know what they want. And it's very interesting because I've interviewed many people that have talked about their experiences. I have family and friends that have some just amazing and frightening experiences, like lifelong experiences, lifelong contactees. And some of the stuff that I have been told off air with other people correlates with, the same stories, the same circumstances, and, the microchips that have been found in people and all these clandestine operations. It seems as if the truth is hidden in plain sight, yet there's so much disinformation out there. Most people don't know what's real. And, you're going to have one person that's high up and, high ranking officials that are going to say, oh, there's absolutely nothing true about UFOs. It's all fake. It's all It's all swamp gas from Uranus. Then you're going to have people that are going to come out and say, oh, they're all demons. They're all devils that come from the pits of hell. And they have these locust heads and crowns of darkness. You've just got all these different stories out there. But if you really use, at least for me personally, and from what I have seen and experienced and everything that I have researched in my life, I feel there's something out there that is manipulating the natural order of humanity. And it's like whispering in people's ears. It's like, I was talking to Diamond about this the other day on the ride back from the Disclosure Con. Are these beings out there? There's like this universal law where they can't interfere, because there's probably beings out there that are so far advanced they could literally think it and destroy this entire planet or turn it into a node for information to make them stronger or something like that. But there's something that prevents that from happening. With over 460 nuclear reactors around the world that have 40-year shelf lives and isotopes that last for millions of years, saying, hey, what a hell of a way to steam water. I get it. But at the same time, we're still here. We're still here with all the fracking and all the crap that's going on around the world. We're still here. Many of us are still rocking and rolling and doing fantastic. But at the same time, that's like we're always at the edge of, like, look at the doomsday clock right now. Look at how many times there's almost been a nuclear catastrophe. I mean, you've been in the military. You know about stuff we don't know about. How close have we been to a complete annihilation? And it hasn't happened yet. But there's got to be something out there just whispering in people's ears. The Ozzy Osbourne song back in the day, Black Sabbath, it was brilliant. Generals gather in the masses, just like witches at black masses. There's good and bad in every faction, but would you agree with me to an extent that there's probably something out there that doesn't have our best interest at heart, and something's preventing it from completely taking us over, but it's trying to get us to take ourselves over?
Excuse me. Well, I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't go that far. I would say that I do not doubt that we have been visited by others in the past at some time. I do not doubt what I and others saw that night. How they interact with us, I am not aware and do not know of anybody personally that has ever had a close encounter of the third kind where they actually made physical contact. The only reports I have that I've found in my research that are totally credible, and when I say totally credible, I need scientific research documentation. Somebody saying they saw something doesn't cut it for me. If you got it tracked on radar, you've got photographs of it. It's like the package that was over Belgium. That is one of the most documented UFOs in history, other than the one that I think it was the French or whoever it was just chased not too long ago, that they've got tracking of it on a thermal imager moving in excess of 1,500 miles an hour, so, and in massive accelerating. And these guys chased this thing around for an extended period of time with multiple radar sites on the ground and multiple aircraft in the air tracking it simultaneously. We also had an event with the U.S. Navy where there were 16 inbound objects that they caught on their synthetic aperture radars, airborne radars. All the radar systems tracked those 16 objects simultaneously. All of them saw unbelievable speeds in excess of 3,000 miles an hour in these objects. They would slow as low as 125 miles an hour and go as fast as 3,000 miles an hour. And they launched multiple aircraft out to intercept that. And by the time the aircraft got out there, these things took off and left them. The aircraft never were within visual range, but they were able to track them on radar beyond visible range of the aircraft, the AWACS jets, and the aircraft carriers and destroyers in the area. So we know that they're there. I don't really think that they have an influence on us as far as telling us who the ruler are, or we're not going to have a nuclear war or any of those things. I don't see that. I have seen no evidence of that, but there's all kinds of evidence that the craft are here because we continue to see it, basically to this day.
Have you heard of the evidence where there have been nuclear facilities that have been, or like nuclear launch sites where there have been unidentified craft? I just got 5G. I need to. Okay, I'm better now. There was UFOs flying over nuclear missile sites, and when they flew over these sites, the facility was shut down momentarily, or parts of the facility.
I haven't seen the reports of where it was shut down over the facility. I have seen the reports, and I think it was 1989, where we had a nuclear storage facility up in the north central part of the United States that objects came in and flew and hovered directly over the nuclear facilities. And then there was also, we have a recorded where we actually launched a test of an ICBM, and in the ICBM, they had a warhead, but they weren't going to detonate it. But they launched that, and when it launched and they were filming it going up, they had high-speed cameras taking pictures of it, and they actually captured a round-shaped UFO coming into the frame while this thing is launching, while it's flying up through the sky, accelerating. This UFO thing comes in up next to the rocket, and you can actually see it fire a laser beam from it to the rocket, and it moves around the rocket, and they've got frame by frame by frame by frame by frame of this thing accelerating up with a rocket as it's going up and firing this beam over to where the warhead was on the front of the rocket, and then it flew out of the frame. And they've got multiple
laser beam.
Yeah, they've got multiple images of that, and that was denied by the U.S. Air Force. The U.S. Air Force, the guy that actually captured the images, they told him, you're never going to talk about this. So he didn't for a long time. And then he did talk about it, and the Air Force came out and they scrubbed his record. They said he was never part of this project. He was never in the Air Force or any of these other things. Well, he came back and proved. He showed he was in the Air Force. He showed his paycheck stubs. He showed where he was at this facility. He showed his telephone number and his business cards and everything from when he was working there. And he actually had a sergeant major or somebody that worked with him actually write a letter and say, yes, he was working on the project. And then the Air Force still tried to deny it, but the evidence is irrefutable that he did indeed work on it. And there's photographs of it. You can actually see the photographs of the thing. He's got photographs. So he came out, and they're there.
Lee, there's indisputable evidence that we have in the military has reports of all of these unidentified flying objects, pilots being tracked by them, etc. You just mentioned many of them, but I think a lot of the listeners out there are most interested in the clandestine military industrial complex secret back deal with the aliens and the multi-underground levels where all the aliens are hidden, where they have all the secret meetings. In all of your military expertise, you've never come across any shred of evidence that all of those stories are they nonsense, or could they be true still, or what do you think?
I have never in 33 years of working with the government, every alphabet soup, foreign governments, foreign militaries, so on and so forth, no one has ever mentioned a group of aliens living on the planet or even alive aliens. The only case, and like I said, when you see one when you're 14 years old, you're fascinated by it for the rest of your life. This doesn't go away. So, every time I've heard anything about a spaceship, somebody saw, and it got to the point when I was working for the military, and I had night vision and thermal imagers and all other different types of low light cameras and radars and things that I was actually playing with all the time because I was developing these technologies. Anytime anything would show up in the sky anywhere at night, people would call me, and I would, because I lived on top of a mountain and I had long range thermal imagers and long range night vision equipment. They would say, hey, Lee, I'm seeing something on the mountain, up on top of the mountain over behind here. And I'd go outside and fire up something and look over that way to see if I could see anything. And I actually have seen things in the sky that I can't explain, even with people calling me, because I had a view to the south of 105 miles and a view to the west of about 230 miles from my house. So you know how that is. Y'all live in Colorado. So, I've seen a lot of these things, but I have yet to have anybody tell me that there's ever been physical contact with live beings, anything between the U.S. military. Okay, now there are reports of humans touching spacecraft, military personnel touching spacecraft, witnessed by multiple military personnel touching spacecraft, audio recordings of the conversations while it's going on, and the visualization of it, seeing it come in and land and fire beams down in front of them and fly away. The U.S. NASA had their top scientists. There's a single photograph of the UFO that was taken over Belgium, and it was taken with a really nice camera. Is the great part about it. It's not a cheap camera. High resolution image. That image was analyzed by NASA, and NASA authenticated that image as being an authentic image taken from a camera of a UFO in flight. NASA said there was absolutely no way that you could fake that image because of the high resolution of the film that the guy had.
NASA.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's NASA, Lee.
Yeah, well, I know, never acknowledges scientific advancements, and there's all kinds of other things you can call NASA.
I heard that NASA made up space in a Hollywood basement on the flat Earth, though.
Yeah, well, that's not true.
I thought it was a convex Earth.
Yeah, no, we actually went to the moon. I got the opportunity one time years ago. They have a huge telescope, and it has a laser on it that calibrates the lens to be able to deal with vibrations of the atmosphere as you try to look out in space. And there is actually a reflecting pad on the moon, and they actually fire a laser up and bounce it off of that reflecting pad on the moon, and you can actually see it flicker on the moon through that telescope. So, you know, we put that up there, and a lot of people don't know when you talk about the moon, they never talk about the fact that the Russians went to the moon. Did you guys know that the Russians sent things to the moon?
Oh yeah, Russia, China.
Yeah, the Russians sent tanks. So we go up, we send guys. The Russians sent miniature tanks that actually shoot because they didn't know what they were going to encounter. So they sent little rovers with guns on them. I mean, the Russians have done a lot of things that we don't know about. I mean, of course, the Russians were the first one to put Sputnik up, you know.
I got to interrupt on that note, Lee, real quick before I forget. This is important because you brought up the Russians. Their research and the probes that they've sent towards Mars and Phobos. Have you seen those strange anomalies that they capture and then it just goes, eh? They have had the worst luck sending probes and craft to Phobos and Mars. It seems like they can do just about everything else, but anytime they shoot something towards Mars, something stops it.
Yeah, can't really tell you what the problem is with them. The Russians are a brute force government. They think that, you know, if you want to put a bigger rocket into space rather than making it more aerodynamic and making more fuel efficient engines, they're more power. We make this go into space. You know, they just put more engines on it, and so that's their brute force way. But they're not, you know, cutting edge scientific like we are. I mean, you know, NASA wanted to have a writing instrument that would operate in zero G. So they spent $1 million to develop an ink pen that would write in zero G. The Russians use a pencil. So that's the type of difference or technology gap you see between the Russians and the Americans, and so, or other countries, even the European Space Agency. So, you know, deep space probes are a little more difficult to control and communicate with and be able to tell where they're at. In fact, if you want to send a probe into deep space, you need a crystal guidance system similar to what's made by a company called Kierfot. And the accuracy of a Kierfot guidance system is that of if you were to fire a needle from New York City and that needle were to fly all the way out to Los Angeles, the accuracy of that needle would land in an area the size of a postage stamp. And so we know that that's the accuracy of one of their systems, because when you calculate the distance of how far Voyager has traveled and how accurate it is on its travels out through our solar system out into deep space, that's the accuracy, because that's the system that's on that. So unless you have a guidance system that is on that spacecraft that is that accurate and knows where you are, and you have the ability to know where it is and it be able to tell you where it is progressing to and be able to aim its antenna back at you, and you be able to aim your antenna at it, and nothing fails in between, you know. So as you're going out there, it's a lot harder because you're not just in orbit, you're going out through deep space, and we're moving on a planet and it's moving out through space and we're rotating. You know, so it's not as easy as it looks to send something out into deep space and stay in contact with it. We've had our share of failures too.
Absolutely.
Hey, Lee, is there...
Real quick, Diamond, I was just going to say, the only reason I brought that up is because I've seen some pictures when Russia sent probes to Mars or Phobos area, and it looked like the last image that they got was this giant craft, and then it's gone. Now I've read the debunking theories on that as well, and I'm not sold on either. I just want the truth, so I like to get as much information as possible.
Yes, send me that. I'll be happy to review it for you. I actually have not seen that image, so I'd be happy to review it for you.
Okay, yeah. Well, fantastic. Diamond, you had something? Sorry about that.
Yeah, Mickey, what about any countries with secret bases on the dark side of the moon? And one other thing, are there Nazis in Antarctica in New Schwabenland? Go.
Don't think there's any Nazis, and I haven't heard anything as far as a U.S. base on the far side of the moon. Now, Buzz Aldrin at one time, and there was somebody else, and I can say Buzz because he's a friend of mine. And so I think it was Buzz or somebody else, but said that they actually saw something on the backside of the moon, and they weren't real sure what it was, because they were pretty high up and so on and so forth. But there are astronauts who have been around to the dark side and said they saw something back there. Now, what exactly it was, I can't say. Nobody has ever told me or shown me a photograph of it. But it is said that there was something on the backside.
It's interesting also to think about the way that the moon, the rocks that they brought back, they're made of this weird titanium alloy. They found these neurons in some of them where they've taken them and they've sliced them in thin layers, the amount of titanium deposits, the giant maskins on the dark side of the moon that are almost like gravitational thrusters. It reminds me of a version of the Truman Show, but what do I know? I'm a conspiracy theorist in the basement. Now, I would like to say this, though. The possibilities are fascinating. And for us to say we've got all the answers is quite silly, especially because of the compartmentalization. And for some reason, Lee, and I don't know if you'll agree with me on this or not, but it seems to me that something out there doesn't want us to know why we're here, what we're doing here, how we got here, and where we're going. It just wants us to consume and go to work and die. It's like work, consume, die. Next.
Yeah,
you must obey. You must obey.
That's the deep state and the people like the Rockefellers and so on and so forth that want to run the world. The Soroses of the world that keep everybody entertained with the mass media. It's all controlled by them. I mean, when you look at who owns the media, when you look at who owns all the restaurants, and you look at who owns the movie theaters and all of our entertainment, it's a very, very small group of people. And so what they've done is they have changed our culture so is that it's all flash, bling, bang. We don't get back to the basics anymore, and it's always competing with the Joneses and trying to one up here and one up there, and who's got the nicer house, who's got the nicer lawn. So we are consumed with all of these other things that are unimportant when we should actually just be sitting back, relaxing, and looking up in the sky and seeing these things that are actually moving around up there. I mean, like I said, if you have a high-powered thermal imager, and it's a good, decent thermal imager with, a minimum of a 480 by 640 resolution minimum, okay? If you can get an HD unit, that's even better. It'll cost you probably $3,000 more, but for the image that you'll get, you're paying $11,000-$12,000 for it. But I mean, you're going to get a nice image and a nice zoom. So, the things are out there. It's just that, everybody has been consumed with all of what's on the advertising and the TV shows and all of that. And they just lead us down to it. That's how they take our money. That's how they charge us the interest. That's why they want us to buy a car that costs as much as a house. I mean, you got to have the nicest clothes, all these things. It's disposable income. And these manufacturers make these things so they don't last. So they're good for a year or two, and then you got to get rid of them. They're not repairable. So we're making huge piles of trash. We're polluting the planet. Monsanto is all kinds of chemicals and toxins and things that are killing us off, killing off the bees, with colony disease. And so, we all need to stop and take a look around and go, wait a minute, what's going on here? And I think that's what's happening now in our government and in the population of the United States, we're finally, waking up from this slumber that we've been in and going, hey, this isn't right. We don't need to be working 80 hours a week for minimum wage and starving for all of these other things. And so everything swings back and forth like a pendulum. It's all cyclic. And so the pendulum is starting to swing the other way. And I think people are starting to wake up and see what's going on and realize Monsanto's is poisoning us, and realize these people are working us to death for nothing and charging us interest where we shouldn't be paying it, and all kinds of fees and all kinds of regulations. We're going to go back to more of a basic, because the American people, I think, are fed up with it.
And folks, remember, it's because they love us so much. Now, one of the things that I'd also like to ask here before we close out tonight, and unless there's anything you'd like to add, Diamond and Lee, this is just great information. Hopefully we can get you back on the podcast. Is there like a way to efficiently, obviously you've got connections in very high places, and you've got friends and acquaintances that can really make a change in the, I don't know about the political realms, but in maybe the military industrial complex, which can then branch out into other realms like politically. Now, one of the things that I find fascinating about the media is, yeah, you're right. There's now 5 corporations that control over 90% of what people consume via media-wise. And I learned at a very young age, one of the best teachers I ever had, my communications teacher sophomore year, he was just amazing, Mr. Maddox. He really taught how the media can make you think things and do things and sculpt you in a way that's just insane. I mean, how many people out there, when they're thinking about something like what they're going to do next or how they're going to do something now, they're connecting it to what they've seen on TV before. Like, oh, well, that's how it was done before in the past. And they're not even really thinking it that way, but they're looking for something to compare it to. And if they haven't done it in real life, they're going to compare it to what they've seen in TV. And one of the questions that I wanted to ask you is about magic. And I'm not talking about stage magic. I'm talking about real magic, unexplained occult science, using the mind and techniques to create certain scenarios and situations. It's been scientifically proven that if somebody watches an event unfold, whether it's a car wreck or some, let's say for a car wreck, as an example, somebody's watching another person get in a car wreck, a certain part of that person's brain that's just watching the accident, their brain is going to activate same parts of the brain. So you get 1 million, 100 million people, 1 billion people to watch a movie, and you embed these subliminal programs and clandestine symbols and tones and different archetypes and conversational hypnosis. And you put it all in this package. And same goes for the Bible as an example, or Revelation. What a perfect way to create a blueprint of prophecy and make it unfold, because people are believing it and they're also pushing into it because that is their belief. Now, I'm not saying it's not prophecy. I'm not saying it is prophecy, but what a great handbook and design to create these systems of control. And that's another reason I feel that they don't want us to know about if these MFers, these money funders that love us so much, these dungeon masters that are way above most people's pay grades, that are writing the checks, that are funding these institutions and organizations. Maybe they don't want us to know, because if we really knew what was going on, all of these institutions of control would shatter. Just like you're saying, Lee, consume, purchase, go to work, die. And while you're doing so, pay all these industries a bunch of crap while you're saying, like, for example, I think it's good. I just read an article about how these dollar stores are hurting now because of these tariffs with China. Well, you know what? I understand that you have to be able to purchase lower priced products. I get that. But think about all the crap there at many of these dollar type stores that come from China that's full of poison and toxins. And now China's not taking our recyclables. So where are we going to put it? Consume, consume, consume. There has to be balance, because eventually it's going to get to a point where there's not going to be anything left. Just watch Dr. Seuss. I mean, you could have an IQ of like 60 and watch Dr. Seuss, the Lorax, and realize you can't just rip everything out of the ground and then keep going. You're going to run out. So,
hey, Rex,
yes.
You know what? The consumer out there and the listener, they can opt out of this nightmare. Leah and I decided after long discussion 4 years ago to opt out. It takes about a decade and we're not there yet. but we're opting out of society completely. The first thing you do is you start voting with your dollar. You can collapse these corporations like Monsanto and the pharmaceutical companies by stop purchasing their products. If 1 billion people stop purchasing all the GMOs that are in the cardboard boxes and packages in the center of the grocery store, the companies go bankrupt and there's no need to produce this poison. If you start buying local, and see how it says 100% beyond organic, that means you're buying from Diamond and small farmers that don't even sell to supermarkets, so that you can stop giving the multinational corporations your money. Stop it. Start making your own money. Start making your own electricity. Opt out of the lie. Do it now. Stop being a slave. If we all do it tomorrow, the corporations go, but everyone's just scared. Their life is driven by fear. So you got to stop being scared and start getting prepared. Start getting motivated by people like Rex and Diamond and Mr. Wheelbarger. We are all opting out of this situation because it's about to hit the fan. We have learned from the past, and we have seen what has happened during these cycles. We know that the government doesn't give up about you. So you need to start now preparing to survive and thrive in the new times. You can opt out of the nightmare. You can take baby steps. Stop buying the Cheetos. Start growing your own food. That's my rant.
Yeah, and I was thinking about you earlier today, Diamond. I had another where, we've got the proper pre-planning prevents poor performance. I got another one, and that's learn today so you can live tomorrow. Because if you don't learn the skills that you need to have, how to grow, how to get water, how to cook, how to kill animals, how to skin those animals, when you can eat edibles, learning beyond organic and how to grow these things and deal with pests without pesticides and deal with fertilizing your plants without fertilizer from the grocery store or the farmer's market, whatever. You have to learn to do these things. So that's why I say learn today so you can live tomorrow, because if you don't know it, you're not going to grow it and you're not going to live.
That's what I'm talking about. This has been an awesome conversation. I really appreciate this.
And I did want to, you were talking about subliminal messages. And so how should we say, the largest mass professor of subliminal messages is actually Walt Disney World and Disney with their animated films.
Homeschool.
We live in a scary world. We really do. And when, like you say, Diamond, homeschooling is definitely an option for a lot of people now because they don't want to have their kids indoctrinated in public school systems and have to go through all these vaccinations filled with just different chemicals like thimerosal, cloned baby cells from specific babies from years ago. What else? Animal DNA, insect DNA, all sorts of just stuff. You're going, wow, you really need that stuff in there to cause an immune response to build antibodies? Okay. No thanks. All right, folks, be excellent to each other. Be prepared. Don't be scared. And also do your research. And I want to thank everybody for being here. I want to thank the moderators. Be the change you want to see.